You're listening to the RMPodcast, the official podcast of Red Moon Productions. Here are your hosts, Brandon Davidson, Keith Cheatham, and Sean Sebastian. Enjoy.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Red Moon Podcast. This is a little different. In fact, this is odd. I don't think this has ever happened on the show before. Wow, let me turn the lights on there. From our normal red to the studio lights, you can see two empty chairs across the table from me. That's right, guys. I am one of your normal... Well, yeah, I am your normal new host. Tonight, I'm Brandon Davidson. And as you just saw there in the empty chair right across from me, Mr. Sean Sebastian, heading down to Alabama, having a good time with the fam. And, of course, Mr. Keith Cheatham, the moon shirt. The moon shirt lives on. I am all by my lonesome tonight. This is weird. I mean, I'm normally in my house alone, so... I guess that's not too weird, but being in the studio without these guys doing a show, this is a first of its kind. I've never, ever done a show by myself. So please like, share, subscribe, and do all those wonderful things on social media because truthfully, it's a little lonely here. I need all the love I can get tonight. Right there at the bottom of your screen, Red Moon Book, Red Moon Tweet, Red Moon Picks, Red Moon Productions. On YouTube, just search for us. We're live with you every single Tuesday at 9 p.m. right here in the studio, normally with my other two fine hosts that always join me. But there is a reason they're not here. As I stated with Mr. Sean Sebastian being there on vacation with his family in Alabama, the seat across from me, Mr. Keith Cheatham, he is actually enjoying his fine birthday, his 31st birthday, not here on the podcast. No, that wouldn't be that much fun. Hope they enjoy the show every week like you all do. But no, he is actually at the magical kingdom known as Disney World. That's right. The most wonderful place on the planet. Mr. Keith Cheatham couldn't join us this week because he is also on vacation with his family, with his sister and brother-in-law and their kids and some nieces and nephews, and they're all enjoying the fine times down there in Orlando, Florida. But hey, we got a great show for you this week here on the Red Moon Podcast. Yes, it's just going to be me, a talking head this week. I'm going to be the only one. I can't see comments if they roll in. For all I know, I am talking to myself in this cruel, lonely world, okay? But I'm here to bring you entertainment. I do not let you all down. I want you all to have a show every single week here on the Red Moon Podcast. If we can provide it, we will provide it. We've got a review of Black Widow. Going to have my own thoughts on that. Maybe the other two will join in next week and kind of give their thoughts because we do have another major release this week. Yeah, Space Jam 2. Space Jam 2 is out this, I think it's like Thursday, Friday. I don't know. It's coming out at the end of the week. That's going to be our review for next week, which is, well, we'll see how flopping LeBron King James does in this film. He is a better actor than Michael, but Michael's the GOAT. Okay, Jordan is the GOAT. I rewatched Space Jam actually this past weekend, and I gotta tell you the truth. It's gonna be tough shoes to fill. Okay, tough Jordans to fill. I think Mr. LeBron has a lot to bring to the table. He is a better actor, but he's just not a better player. But we'll see if the story stacks up. So Space Jam 2 is our review next week. Of course, everybody wants to know what our thoughts on Black Widow is. And, of course, we've also got some good headlines. You saw there us giving a happy birthday shout-out to Mr. Keith Cheatham. Go there, blow up his Facebook, blow up Twitter, send him all your well wishes, and send him a happy birthday. But also, we've got Universal is no longer inking, or they've got a new deal with Peacock. They inked a deal with Peacock, but they're no longer exclusively on HBO where they were before. That was their partner. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to do a deep dive there. And we're going to actually forego, because it wouldn't be much fun with just me by myself this week, all by my lonesome. One is the loneliest number that you ever could do. Send me some love, guys. But no, we're actually going to skip over our unique weekly segment this week. What we're really going to do is just dive into the headlines and the movie review, give you my thoughts on Black Widow, all by myself. You just get a one-on-one with me this week, and you get to listen to my opinions and tell me where I'm wrong. And then the other two will join in next week. And also we got our headlines that we'll tackle and do a short little show this week. Again, can't fill as much time when I don't have my two partners here with me. So let's go ahead and get into the review as you all have been anticipating, and everybody has went and seen it this weekend. As the box office numbers don't lie, a lot of people tuned in, whether in theaters or Disney+. We'll talk about that in headlines too. But here is our review of Black Widow. The following is a review by Keith Cheatham. The MCU is back. 2 years have passed since the release of the last MCU film, Spider-Man Far From Home, and while Marvel's latest slew of Disney Plus original series have all been major successes, fans have been itching to get back to theaters for the next Marvel film. This weekend's box office is proof that Marvel is still a hot commodity, as the MCU's latest movie, Black Widow, is bulldozing past pandemic records and has even grossed more in its opening weekend than non-pandemic Marvel films such as Ant-Man and the Wasp and Guardians of the Galaxy. Starring Scarlett Johansson, who reprises her role of the Black Widow, the film named after the character explores much of her past and what Natasha Romanoff was up to during her time on the run between Captain America Civil War and Avengers Infinity War. Directed by Marvel newcomer Kate Shortland, Black Widow could have been a generic Marvel solo outing that came too little too late after Natasha's fate in Avengers Endgame. Instead, what we get is a more intimate story that, while still a little too late, offers us insight and depth into a character that needed it, while giving us closure on her too. Alongside Scarlett Johansson stars Florence Pugh as Yelena Belova, another widow from the Black Widow program, David Harbour as Red Guardian, Russia's own super soldier, and Rachel Weisz as Melina Vostokov, also a Black Widow and scientist from the program. Once undercover as a family in Ohio for the Soviet Union, they all reunite after years apart to face their past and take down the Red Room, where small girls are conditioned into Black Widows. Shortland does well, giving us a darker and more grounded movie than any previous MCU film. With a bleak opening and a film that goes heavy on the action espionage genre for most of its duration, Black Widow is similar in scale, and different enough to warrant its existence. Yes, it would have been nice to have gotten this before Endgame, but it's still a solid film all the same. While the movie's smaller and more intimate scale is a plus, Black Widow as a film still suffers from the unfortunate consequence of knowing how Natasha's story ultimately ends. Knowing how the character's story pans out does rob the film of most of its high stakes, though it does give the film more reason to lean into Florence Pugh's character, Yelena. The movie does a fair job of establishing the emotional connection between Natasha and Yelena in order to pass the torch from Scarlett Johansson to Pugh. Something helped along by the fact that the story alongside Florence Pugh's portrayal of Yelena creates an instantly likable character. Outside of Johansson and Pugh's character, however, we aren't offered much development or depth for the supporting cast. David Harbour's Red Guardian is often hilarious, but despite having the same skill set as Captain America, the film never makes good use of the character, instead electing to demote him to a comedic buffoon, which feels odd considering the character in the beginning of the film was intelligent enough to successfully pose as an American from Ohio, gathering intelligence while undercover for 3 years. Rachel Weisz's character is even less developed, and while fine for the role she plays, really only exists to ensure our leads make it to the Red Room in order to take it down. Likewise, the main adversary throughout the film, Taskmaster, also feels underutilized. Unlike Harbour and Weisz's character, Taskmaster does have a fairly decent backstory, but the film never feels like it uses the character's full potential. With the ability to mimic any fighting style just by watching someone, Taskmaster is capable of performing all of the Avengers' fighting styles, and while we do get to see a few recognizable styles used in the film, nothing particularly unique or creative is done with Taskmaster's abilities. While it would have been nice to see the film put more use to the characters not played by Johansson and Pugh, ultimately we still receive a fun and satisfying film with a solid story. It's not Avengers Endgame, but it never needed to be. Instead, having a more intimate movie to bring audiences back to the MCU feels much more fitting and has me eager to see what Marvel does now that the Infinity Saga is over. I give Black Widow 3 out of 4 stars. 3 out of 4 stars for, yes, Black Widow. Again, if you're just joining us, yeah, I'm here. I'm all by myself this week. Pulling one for the team. They're both on vacation. Mr. Cheatham is enjoying his birthday down in the Magical Kingdom, and Sean is enjoying a vacation down in Alabama with his family. Oh, the pup came to join me. She's in here now. Who knows when she'll get restless. She'll keep me company. But yes, 3 out of 4 stars for Black Widow. Real quick, too, want to give a shout-out. I totally forgot to do this in the intro. I don't know if they're watching, but they may watch again later. It is our good friend Neil Singleton and his wife Megan Singleton's anniversary. So happy anniversary, Meal, as we call him. Combine their names. Isn't it so cute? Meal, happy anniversary. We are so happy to have you all in our lives, and we hope you are enjoying your second anniversary that isn't your first anniversary in pandemic world. But hey, you wrote a beautiful post earlier. I read it today talking about how you wouldn't have wanted to spend it with anybody else. Isn't that sweet? So wish you all many more wedded years of bliss and love. Let's talk about Black Widow. 3 out of 4 stars. I do agree with Keith's review, and I have to say I have minor complaints, little nitpicks, but for the most part, I truly thought I really thought Black Widow was thankfully the film we needed after the long, stalling of just with the pandemic and the theatrical releases slow to come back. And, they were pushing this as kind of, we knew we were interested in seeing Black Widow long before, but after seeing the trailer 50,000 times, and especially when it missed its whole mark last year of release, I'm not going to lie, I was a little bit, I wasn't looking as much forward to it as I have some of their past releases. Not to mention that I think, they needed the year. I think they needed the year off to kind of give everybody that breather. I think that we've seen so many Marvel movies throughout, obviously the last decade, ever since starting with Iron Man, and after the whole phase 1, 2, and 3 were done, the Infinity Saga was finished. It's kind of like we've seen WandaVision, we've seen Falcon and the Winter Soldier on Disney Plus, and of course Loki now wrapping up this week. But with these, smaller shows and kind of slowly starting the next phase of getting us into who is that next mega villain, what is the next big thing that's on display for us to see with Marvel, it really is kind of, I think it leads everybody to think, okay, I need something that is not only going to whet my appetite, but is worth watching. And thankfully, Black Widow does serve a little bit of that. But thankfully, I think the things it does right is actually not focus on the bigger-than-life spectacle battles that we've seen, obviously, that led up to Endgame, because each one of those had to be bigger and better than the last. But the truth and the fact of the matter is that, no, we needed something that I think was a little bit more quaint and something that was this in-between story. Black Widow takes place in between the, first Avengers Infinity War, the first of those two, and then, of course, it's right after Civil War. And it fits nicely in there, and thankfully, too, with the family structure, the family-oriented message of the film, in terms of, depending on that as the crutch of the movie, I really do think they pulled it off. I think that they did a nice job of actually giving you characters that you hadn't met before that are, that do have this dynamic that's believable and relatable, and at least some, as far as, not having superpowers goes, but at least makes them likable enough and comedic enough that you actually want to see how this all ends up and turns out. And of course, even knowing at the end of the film the fate that I guess, happens with Black Widow, that comes to Black Widow, that's not something you really want to dwell on. But I think after knowing what happens to her, it's nice to have this little piece of the puzzle. And who knows how many other prequels we could have with Black Widow in the story. I think Scarlett Johansson does a fantastic job returning as the character, but definitely it is her supporting castmates that get the spotlight in this film. I mean, Florence Pugh does an amazing job, fantastic in this film. And so do Rachel Weisz and Harbour. But the problem, I think, ultimately is with Harbour's character, Red Guardian. I ultimately, I hate to say this, but truth be told, I thought they didn't utilize him as much, and Keith hinted at it in his review. I was ultimately disappointed with the fact that he just seemed like a bumbling idiot throughout parts of the film, and especially with someone who has the same powers as Captain America. You know, there is the one main arch nemesis throughout the whole entire story that is Taskmaster, and he himself can mimic the abilities and has watched hours and hours and hours of footage training to become basically the main arch nemesis of the Avengers and all of these superheroes. He's got their fighting techniques down to a T. And I think with Red Guardian, what I was more disappointed with was he's been locked away ever since they were exposed, and he gets sent off to prison. Taskmaster hasn't seen him in action, and I thought that would have been a really cool plot point, to have actually seen him meet his match with somebody he hasn't seen in action yet, who he hasn't learned his techniques. And they really just waste it. They don't really, do a whole lot with Red Guardian, and they come up short. And I was a little bit disappointed with that. Ultimately, though, I was satisfied throughout the whole film, with, from beginning to end. It has heart. It's got, comedic relief, all the ingredients that you would expect from a Marvel film. It is a great foray back into the universe since we've had a year off. I do think I would have probably liked this film less had this film come out a year ago. Because truth be told, I think that, we needed that year break. I think everybody it was just like with Star Wars and kind of that fatigue setting in. I think with the MCU, as good as it's been, and as they've had very rare misses throughout, and most of that was early on. They've really got it honed in now. Kevin Feige has just done an incredible job, no doubt about it, in continuing the MCU. But I think that year break is something that we all benefited from, and I honestly really am looking forward to the other 3 films. We got 3 more Marvel flicks coming out this year, and I for one, am looking forward to them now because of Black Widow, because it actually did deliver in the sense of being another fun flick that I was looking forward to after. Well, I wasn't looking forward to it. I was, but I wasn't based on the trailers. The trailers I had seen way too many times. I was like, please just get this movie out. But ultimately, I was looking forward to just seeing if it would convince me that, okay, no, they're still doing fine. Even after WandaVision, even after Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And funny enough, I haven't seen Loki yet. I know a lot of MCU fans will hate me for that. And honestly, Keith talks it up all the time, and I've heard it's actually the best of the 3 so far. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm definitely going to watch it, and I am looking forward to it. But yes, 3 out of 4 stars for Black Widow. A good return after a year off to the MCU. We've still got Shang-Chi, we've got Eternals, and we've got Spider-Man still coming this year. I mean, we're under half the year. I mean, we're already past the half-year mark. We're into the later half of the year, and yes, we've still got 3 more Marvel flicks coming. It's insane. Alrighty, guys, that's going to do it for our review talk this week. But, of course, now we're moving on to the headlines. Got some things to discuss there. So let's, of course, just, it wouldn't be a show without our beautiful headline open. Let's roll it. Oh, my dog's going nuts now since I did that. See, y'all probably didn't expect me to do it because I'm alone in my house, and this is very bizarre because I don't think of this as if I'm talking, to you all out there, or I don't think of it as I'm talking to myself here at home. I am talking to you all out there in live streaming land. So, and I can't see any feedback. I've got too many buttons to push. I'll look at them later. And again, this could be weird when somebody's watching, like, this guy's just talking to himself. But, I can't go to Keith for any kind of opinion. He has none. And Sean, they're just being super quiet tonight. They ain't got nothing to say. So I'm all alone here. I'm by myself doing this show all alone on my lonesome. But you know what? We carry on. And our headlines this week, as I already hinted at, yes, Peacock inked a deal with Universal. Or other way around, I guess. Universal inked a deal with Peacock. They are no longer exclusively showing at the end of this year is when the deal goes in place. They are no longer exclusively showing Universal Pictures films after they come out of theaters streaming on HBO. They will now stream on Peacock, which is interesting because we've talked about this for the last couple weeks. And honestly, I think it was about a few weeks ago we were talking about the streaming services that we would subscribe to, and ultimately what would it take for us to subscribe? Would it have to be originals? Would it have to be nostalgia for older things that released on the platform? And funny enough, it's like these production houses, these distribution houses are they're really starting to dilute the waters, and they are ultimately trying to start. I think they're trying to figure out the best way to navigate through the waters of the streaming services by trying to partner with certain ones to maybe drive interest and get people to subscribe, but also to see maybe if their movies do better on one platform versus the other. And I think what's interesting about this is that it's a weird deal if you look at the particulars. So it takes place after this year for next year's films. So instead of the 200-day standard release in theaters, Universal made a deal with theaters that they will do 120 days standard release in theaters, but then when it does finally go to streaming for 4 months of the year, it will go to Peacock. After that, it'll be 10 months that Universal can send their movies to any streaming service. Anyone they make a deal with, anybody who will take their movies, anybody who will pay them what they want to be paid to stream their movies. But then the last 4 months after those 10, so it's 18 months total, the last 4 months after that 10, it'll go back to Peacock. So it's a 1.5 year deal where there's this convoluted, 4 months at the beginning, 4 months at the end that Universal is going to be strictly on Peacock. And in the middle, there's some wiggle room, and I guess what you're thinking there is maybe you're going to catch all the people who want to see it right out of the gate. They're going to subscribe to Peacock. They're going to see it on there, and then when it's on these other streaming services, they'll have already gotten their fix in the last couple months having seen it. Maybe that's what Peacock's thinking. Like, yeah, this is still a good deal. And with Universal, maybe they haven't seen the love from HBO Max. Maybe they haven't actually seen anything that has, given them the hint that, yeah, this is a successful streaming platform. And, Warner Brothers already has a lot of stuff on HBO. Maybe that's a little bit too, there's too many on there, too many distribution, production houses that are on there that Universal's like, no, they can have Warner Brothers. That's fine. We'll go over here to Peacock and we'll be the exclusive production house on that streaming service. And I think it's just, again, we're starting to see after the pandemic, even though the theaters were quick to jump on the bandwagon of trying to close these deals, trying to figure out a way that they could keep, movies and, movie distribution happy and keep people, under the tent of getting these movies out there into the theaters and keeping them as long as they could, but also knowing now that things had shifted monumentally, that they didn't have the power they had before. But what's funny about that is that ultimately, I still think they're in this really gray area. Nobody has a science to this right now. Everybody's in it for themselves, like business is. Dog eat dog. They're all trying to figure out, well, what is the best method here of approach? Is a longer theatrical run better ultimately? Or is it trying to get it out of the theaters and get it onto the first streaming platform we can get it on and seeing how popular it is then? Because the other funny thing is, we're going to talk about now, we're going to shift to how successful the streaming platforms have been. And especially with Disney Plus. Because for the first time, we just talked about how big a hit Black Widow was at the beginning of the show with the box office numbers, obviously growing since even F9 just a couple weeks ago. But it's interesting because the box office has reached its highest numbers since Sonic the Hedgehog came out, which is a long time ago. But that's the world we live in with the pandemic. But also what's interesting is the first time in the entirety of Disney Plus's streaming service that they've released these exclusive movies, such as Mulan. And, no, it wasn't Trolls. Trolls was another, that's not Disney. Raya and the Last Dragon. That was another one they released for the $30 premium. And then you've got now Black Widow releasing at the same time in theaters as on streaming. And believe it or not, they released the numbers for how well it did on streaming. And what's so funny is it actually made $80 million domestically and $60 million was from Disney Plus. And a majority of the Disney Plus streaming, they clarified and announced that, yes, it was from U.S. households. So is this going to be bad for theaters? Probably, absolutely. That's a sure sign. But put the theaters aside. Does this now screw the box office over to the point where you're not making as much on these blockbusters? Because now we have a problem of you're undercutting yourself. You know, when you come out and maybe, yes, you could say, this is all, because of post-pandemic and they're having to do that. No, Disney Plus said from the outset, even when the pandemic started, this just started, or streamlined the process of getting everything to streaming. So it's actually kind of funny that this movie comes out, it does over 100 million globally, which is easily the best so far pandemic release. But in terms of the people who went out and saw it in the theaters, they got most of those numbers on Thursday and Friday nights, which were the eager fans who have been wanting to get back to the theaters and see another MCU film. But apart from that, there was a huge sharp drop-off on Saturday and Sunday, the walk-in stragglers. And so if you're going and paying a premium price because you've got maybe 2-3 people in your party, as opposed to the $30 price tag on Disney Plus, and if they only watch it that first weekend that it comes out, well then what about repeat viewers? What about people who saw it there in your household? If you got a bunch of, maybe you brought in your in-laws, maybe they wanted to come over and watch it, and you got a nice home theater set up, and you just made a crap ton. Disney's happy. Disney's getting the money, and that's directly to them. But then what happens in week 2 and week 3 and week 4 when these movies used to be at the top of the charts, when there was a lull, when there wasn't other things coming out? You're pushing that money off the table. You're saying, oh, no, they can still do direct to consumer. We can get that line of income coming from Disney Plus. But what happens if all your fans and everybody who sees it in the first week and it's a huge sharp drop-off? That's really going to be the test that we have to look at in the next few weeks. Does Disney report the numbers from Disney Plus regarding Black Widow after the initial release, after the premiere week? Do they do the numbers next, this coming weekend, next week, the week after that, by the end of August? Is it going to be so clear-cut that they absolutely have a pathway to victory of saying, we don't need the theaters, we will release on Disney Plus streaming alongside theaters? Yeah, we'll get a little extra money from them. But absolutely, if we have a direct to streaming release and it turns out to be a hit week after week and we rake in all this money, what's to say that Disney doesn't end up going that route? That's the interesting thing with Disney is Disney has, I think, they're the ones right now with the most, I think they're the ones with the best IPs available that can give you the best bang for your buck, the big blockbusters. Your Marvels, your Pixars. These movies come out, they're huge hits. And Disney may have found a way to, that silver bullet of just saying, okay, we're the one distribution and production company that we don't need the theaters. We can do this on our own streaming platform. But I think we'll see in the months and the weeks to come and the months to come as theaters continue to get more foot traffic. Again, it did fantastic across, across the seas, across the sea and obviously here at home. So time will tell. But I happen to err on the side that I actually think that they're going to find out there's a huge drop-off because $30 I think is still too steep a price. I think at the end of the day, consumers don't want that. I don't think consumers are going to pay the $30 premium. Yeah, maybe to shut the kids up when it's a Pixar film, or keep them quiet, or even something like this. I think your hardcore fans are going to want to go to the theater, and that'll still be there for them. But even the casual ones who are like, yeah, I'll watch this, they'll wait for it to be available on streaming, because you can't hold it at a $30 premium forever. We already know that if you're willing to wait a month, you get it for free if you got the service. So if that's the case, well, then most people are going to be willing to do that. But if you're looking for something to do on a weekend and you want to get back out and about and you want to actually get out of your house, and you may be willing to take your fam to go to the theater and pay the premium price it is to see something on the big screen, then that's somewhere where Disney Plus is not putting forth that effort. It's not serving that need. And so really, I'll be more curious when Disney puts out the figures, not so much in the premiere week, but in the weeks to come. And how well does Disney Plus stack up at that point until it's available for free? And it's not like they're not keeping track of these analytics. Of course they are. They're going to try to figure out how they can squeeze every dollar out of a property that they can. So it's not like they're dumb. They're not stupid. They're going to find how they can maximize their profits. That's what all these companies are doing. That's what Universal's trying to do with inking a deal with Peacock and trying to get more views there. What all these streaming platforms are trying to do to get eyeballs. I mean, it really is interesting, and it's kind of cool to see just the market and compete like this. And we win. We ultimately win. But I think sadly the bygone era of the theater slowly kind of slips away. Now with the box office numbers, I know people are like, how can you say that? Come on. They're great. How can you say the theaters are slipping? And again, time will tell. Time will tell. But if these streaming platforms continue to be as vigorous as they are, and they continue to try to put forth the best effort to put theaters out of business, to maximize their own profits, again, it's a dog-eat-dog world. They're going to do whatever they can to make sure that they put as much money that they've invested in these films back on their table and then some. And if the theaters just aren't that way to do it anymore, then so be it. It may be some niche thing that people do, just like listening to records. It may not be the most popular thing anymore to go to the theater. But we'll see. We'll see. Alrighty, guys. Did it. Half hour there by myself, talking head. I hope you all enjoyed. Again, next week we will have a full-fledged episode like we do every week here on the Red Moon Podcast. Every Tuesday, 9 p.m., right here. Catch us live, whether it's me or my fine comrades over there across the table. Yes, they will be back next week. We will have a full-fledged show. But I want to thank everybody for tuning in and listening. If you all did, I want to thank you all for all the support that you give us every single week here on the Red Moon Podcast. It means a lot to me. It means a lot to them, even there across the table, because they put in a lot of time too, and they make the effort to show up and give you all some entertainment. And don't worry. Oh gosh, my dog's into something. I gotta go take care of her. So we're ending at the right time. But don't worry, we got other things coming. It's not just the podcast. I know we've been saying it forever, just like the website. But the website's pretty good, right? That's right. You can go there, redmoonproductions.com. You can also email us that old-fashioned way, rmpodcast@redmoonproductions.com. So until next time, I am one of your hosts, Brandon Davidson, alongside our non-existent hosts over there across the table. That's right. Sean Sebastian, Keith Cheatham. We'll see y'all next time on the Red Moon Podcast.
We hope you enjoyed this week's episode. For more reviews, previous podcast shows, and everything Red Moon, visit our website, redmoonproductions.com. You can also like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter by searching for Red Moon Productions, LLC. We'll see you at the movies.